Good morning, dear 5th primary students. Welcome back to the second term. And in this term, we're not going to tackle the story of the lost term that's called The Railway Children. We're going to take a new story that's called Oliver Twist. And Oliver Twist is just a little boy. As you can see in this picture, he's just merely a thin, young, weak boy who's holding a bowl asking for food. And we're going to know the story of poor, weak Oliver Twist through this term. I hope you will enjoy it and you will learn a lot from it. And today we're going to talk about the cover, the title, and the author. And unlike The Railway Children, the introduction for Oliver Twist is a rich introduction. We're going to talk a lot about the age in which Oliver Twist was written, and we're going to talk about the author in a very long, rich introduction. So to start the introduction, we have the cover. And the cover has multiple questions, and I'd like you to try and answer them on your own, and check the answers with me after we finish the questions. The first question says, what can you see? And how many boys can you see? And how can you describe the boys? Do you think, or do they look cheerful or sorrowful, happy or sad? What do you think the blonde boy is doing? What do you think the dusty faces of the boys show about their lives? Do you think the second boy's coat and hat fit him well? What do you think this shows? According to the title and cover, which boy do you think is the main character? And the last one says, what's the name of the author? And what do you think the word retold means? The first question says, what can you see? And as you answered, I'm sure you answered correctly, there are 3 boys on the cover, and they look dusty and dirty. They look thin and pale. They are wearing dirty old rags. They're not wearing proper clothes for their age, correct? As we said, there are 3 of them, and if we are going to describe the boys, I think they look a little bit sad, don't you think? They don't look like cheerful, happy children. They look sorrowful, full of sorrows and sadness. What do you think the blonde boy is doing? He is holding a bowl asking for more food, which means he's hungry. And if he's hungry, asking for more food, and that means he is not a very rich person. He can't afford to buy food for himself or to eat properly. And that means he has a weak body. He is not a really strong child. Next, the next question says, what do you think the dusty faces of the boys show about their lives? These boys look very dirty, which shows that they probably don't have proper care or a house to take proper showers or clean themselves or get cleaner clothes, correct? That's actually correct, yes. Do you think the second boy's coat and hat fit him well? What do you think this shows? Clearly, the second boy's coat is a very big coat for him, and he's wearing a top hat and it doesn't really fit his head well. It means these are adult clothes. So if they belong to adults and a child is wearing them, it means that child really doesn't have many options or a lot of clothes to wear, correct? And that means he's wearing whatever he could to help him feel warmer in the cold England back then. According to the title and cover, which boy do you think is the main character? The main character is called Oliver Twist, and as we saw in the previous slide, he said that the boy was holding a bowl asking for more food. So the blonde boy on this cover is the person in question, or the person I'd like to call the main character or the protagonist of the story. He's the most important one in our story. And to tackle the characters, we have a lot of things that we're going to discuss in the next slides. What's the name of the author, and what do you think the story or the word retold means? The name of the author is mentioned right after the name of the story, which is Charles Dickens. And the story was retold by Jenny Dooley. Retold here means that this story was rewritten after Charles Dickens wrote it. It was rewritten in many versions, in a lot of ways, and we're going to tackle this one by Jenny Dooley. So the word retold here, it means that the story was rewritten after Charles Dickens for multiple times for many generations to read, which means it's a very good story for us to read and learn from. We're done with the cover, and now we move on to the title, Oliver Twist. What's the meaning of the word twist? If you look up the meaning of the word twist in the dictionary, you're going to find out that it means to change completely or to turn 180 degrees. It means not stay the same. Do you think this name actually fits Oliver? Is he going to change throughout the story, or is he going to stay the same? His name is Oliver Twist. Which one do you think? We'll learn that as we progress in our story. Next, why do you think the author chose the name Twist for the boy? This is a thinking question, and you have to answer saying your opinion about the title on your own. So we can discuss that during our Zoom sessions or in face-to-face classes whenever we meet or whenever you meet your teacher. Do you think Twist is the boy's actual surname? This is also a thinking question, and you have to think thoroughly on this matter and discuss it with your teacher. Where do you think Oliver's family is? If he is a very young boy that doesn't have a family, that doesn't have enough food, then he probably doesn't have a very rich family. He probably comes from a poor family, or maybe they're not there at all. Maybe they left him. Maybe he's an orphan. He doesn't have parents. We'll see about that later. What do you think is the other boys' relations with Oliver? Do you think they were friends? Do you think they were siblings, brothers? Okay, so you have to think on that and tell your teacher later. This page in your book, in pages 6 and 7, we have a picture of the characters. We have plenty of characters. And in any story, we have something called a flat character. And a flat character is a character that is just there to fill up the incidents of the story. A character that's not going to change a lot, that's not going to affect the storyline a lot. It's just there to add some incidents to the story. But we also have something called a main character, and the main characters are the most important characters in any story. And they progress the story, they change, and they affect the storyline in many ways. And in this picture, we have the most important main characters. That means that we're not just going to meet these characters, we're also going to meet plenty of other characters, including some flat characters in our story. And in here the question says, which characters do you think have the kindest faces, and which one has evil features? So in this picture, who do you think is the kindest, and who do you think is the most evil characters? From their facial features, from the drawing, you can have an idea about the kind people and the evil ones. And the next question says, which characters are you most interested to learn about? So these questions are also for discussion when you meet your teacher at school. This is our writer, Charles Dickens. He was born in 1812 and he died in 1870. And he wrote a lot of books, and he was called the social reformer. He was called the social reformer because he did a lot of acts that helped repair the social situations in England back then. He was born on 7th of February 1812 in Portsmouth, England, and he spent his childhood in London and Kent. He started school when he was 9 years old, which is a very late age to start school. He left school soon after because of financial problems. He didn't have enough money and his family was poor. And his father owed money to people and was sent to prison. So Charles had to take care of his family, had to go find work and pay the debts of his father. So he had to find a job and earn money. First, he worked at a shoe polish factory. Then he worked as a legal clerk, and he learned shorthand, which helped him when he became a reporter. Shorthand is a type of writing. So he learned that, and it helped him when he became a reporter later in his career. He married a woman called Catherine Hogarth in 1836, and he wrote a lot of very important books that helped reform the social life of people and children in his age. Amongst those, A Christmas Carol, Oliver Twist, and A Tale of Two Cities. And there are a lot and plenty of more books that he wrote later in his career, but you don't have to know all the names. Oliver Twist was published in 1838. He died on June 9th, 1870, and was buried in Westminster Abbey, London. As a child, Charles Dickens felt betrayed by the adults that were supposed to take care of him. They couldn't earn money or send him to school properly like a normal child. He had to earn money for himself and find different jobs. These thoughts haunted him throughout many of his writings. It means he wrote about this theme of writing, where he wrote about these ideas a lot in his books. So it was a reoccurring message that he had to convey to the rest of the world, that children are not supposed to work. Children are supposed to have a fun childhood, and they are supposed to take care of not take care of the adults. As an adult, Charles Dickens exerted tremendous efforts to fix the injustices he faced as a child. His books always discussed the case of working children and poor people's life conditions. He gave a number of talks and lectures on social conditions in an effort to improve their lives. And that's why he was called the social reformer, because he tried his best through his writings to change the views of the world towards children and women and people's bad life conditions. And in this slide, we're going to talk about the reformation of London, or how he tried to fix the situations in London. When he became famous, only rich people could afford to buy books. Dickens published his stories in sections in cheaper magazines so poorer people could read them. Many of his novels were like this, describing the harshness or the hard life of the new urban lifestyle that was caused by the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution back then had people lose their jobs. People lost their jobs because of the invention of machines. And when people lost their jobs, they became poorer. And when they became poorer, children had to work in order to earn more money for the family. And that made people's life harder. And that's what Dickens discussed through his books. After his death, social reforms took place. In 1842, it became illegal for boys under 10 and women and all girls to work underground in mines. And primary education became obligatory in 1876. So he really changed London back then. And you have two questions to think about. Do you think it looks as clean as it does nowadays? If you look up the word London or England, you'll find that it's very clean. Does it look like that now? It's not like that now. So why do you think that difference happened? And how do you think life was in London back then? Talking about all the things we said about Charles Dickens, you can tell me that London wasn't a really good place for people to live back then. This is a quote you have in your book saying, many years ago in England, there were special places called workhouses where poor people went to live when they had no money or work, no family or friends to help them, and when they had nowhere else to go. So the last part we're going to tackle through this slide is the workhouse, or are the workhouses. The workhouses are places that existed around London for poor people to work and homeless people to live. The conditions in the workhouses were horrible. Children worked for tens of hours with almost nothing but shelter in return. So they didn't take much food in return, they just took the shelter of the workhouses. They could sleep there and stay there for the nights instead of staying on the street. Lots of adults and children died in workhouses due to lack of food or total exhaustion. They were very tired, working horrible hours, and that made death grow at a much rapid scale. The terrible working hours and conditions were the last appropriate resort to honorable people in London. It means if you were honorable, you had to bear the horrible working hours or become a thief. So either you stay honorable or you work in horrible conditions. It was either a workhouse or joining a gang of thieves. And that's what we're going to see from Oliver. We're going to see his life and what is going to happen to him, what is his life like in the workhouse, and we're going to discuss a lot of things through the story. But that's for later. This is the end of our introduction. Thank you for listening and goodbye.